It's a long story. It all started as I became a nurse at the Derbyshire Royal Infirmary. I trained there in 1954 to 1957, and during my time there I used to visit a very good friend who lived on the outskirts of Hatton. And one evening when I was staying at the farm, there was a local dance that night, and my husband-to-be was there. And we met and we danced and we walked home together, and from that love blossomed, you could say. In 1957 we married, and I'd come to live in Hatton when I'd finished my nursing training.
Me and my husband bought a bungalow in Hatton, and I decided I'd get a little job. And I went down and got a job at the glassworks on the same road as where I lived, Scropton Lane.
If we got a job, we just went to it. Those days, ambition, we hadn't got a clue what we wanted. The majority of us hadn't.
I always wanted to be a nurse, so that was the path I took. I did training at Stafford before coming to Derby, and my ambition really was to look after people.
Someone came to me and said, what are you doing down on the farm? And it was just general work, like. And I said, you want to try and get at the factory, you get more money there. I was on the milk dock, stacking milk churns to start with. And then gradually over the years, I moved through the factory and did more or less every department there was. It was a good move, really. I did 40 years there.
Oh, I went to Nestles for 12 months. I went there when I was 15. Threepence farthing an hour I was getting, if you can remember the old money. But I left after, and I went to the glassworks then, I did. I was blowing bottles for Harry Shaw. I did a few years there, then I went to Hillcrete making concrete blocks. God, it was graft, that was. And then from there I went to Nestles, yeah. And I stayed there till I retired, 34 years.
In 1961, my father started work at Trent Valley and decided that once it was permanent employment, that he'd move all the family, that's 5 boys and my mum and the cat, to a 2-bedroom terraced house no more than 50 yards away from the factory. It was based in Scropton Lane in Hatton. There had actually been a glassworks on that site since the 1800s. It made Pond's hand cream glass, it manufactured Chanel glass, it manufactured the big glass tiles that offices use as walls, which most folks in the village used as doorstops or ashtrays. Big stuff, little stuff, anything that it could produce for semi-automatic production.
It started off just with ordinary, what they call white flint glass. That's ordinary glass, you know. And then developed on with blue glass for the liners. Then we made brown glass, amber glass, for the poison bottles, things like that, you know, with the ribs down the side. We also made opal, white opal, and we also made ruby glass.
The main changes was when I started there, it was milk coming in from the farms, and that finished and they changed over to coffee.
I started on shift work like everybody did. 3 shifts, 6 to 10 and 10, 6 till 12 and 12 till 6 on Saturday. And then Sunday was voluntary overtime. They were a great crowd actually.
hadn't really any ambition, just to get a job. And when I came to leaving school, Clayton's were looking for apprentices. I went for the interview one day, got the job the next. So I started there, went into the machine shop, apprentice fitter machinist.
The job came up for an occupational health nurse at Nestle, part-time. So I thought, with living in Hatton and it not being too far from home, I felt that that would be quite a good idea. And this was a new innovation for Nestle, and the purpose was to look after the workers and to make sure they were fit for purpose, as one might say, fit to do the job.
The family business was slaughtering when I was a little lad, although the slaughtering was done at a weekend, and in the week there were retail butchers. When I left school, I went into building surveying. It stood me in good stead because when I did come into the family business in 1980, the premises needed updating a bit, and so it came in useful for that. And then again in the mid-90s, I built a new abattoir.
My dad was a production operator. In those days, he would either be a glass blower, which was the final process of making the jar, or he would what was called a taker in, which they had to transport the finished glass to a leer to be annealed, or he worked regular nights on the leer, which was taking the cooled glass off the conveyor belt and putting it into boxes.
I worked in the stopper shop. Well, you had to have your training. I'd never seen anything like it before. I mean, I'd never worked with glass at all. And you had to be shown how to do it and how to work the wheel. I really enjoyed it when I got to learn how to do it. We used on a grinding machine. We had to wear a towel round us so we didn't get wet. We were in water all the time. It was a machine where you held these stoppers onto a roller that grinded the glass and made it smooth. And then they went to the lady that was polishing. When you started the job, you had to turn the tap on and you sat at like a trough. I don't know why, but we always had water. You know, when you're grinding the stoppers, you had to get them really straight on the top. Polished rockers.
By the time I finished my apprenticeship, I was married and I got a young son, and things were hard. It was very tight. We lived with my mum for a while, but I started to do well at night school and the company picked up on that and they offered me a transfer into the offices. Well, in 1960, 61, 62, that was a big deal. When I went home and told my mother, she was cock-a-hoop about it. When you went into the offices in those days, it was something.
I went into the factory with rather a lot of trepidation, not having been in the factory before, which was, to me, was very noisy, and all these people, tins clanking and this sort of thing. I thought, oh, I'll never stay here with all this noise.
The conditions were quite good actually, but you had smelly jobs to do. You know, I mean, like you went into the seasoning room for where they used to put the tins of cream to season out on the trays, and that was a smelly job. It was like sour milk.
First, when you go there, you just go what they call taking in. There's four people work on the machine. There's a gatherer, the parison maker, and the blower, and the taker in. And the taker in just takes whatever you make in bottles or whatever it is from the machine to the leer, which is an annealing leer, which anneals the glass. And then, of course, you get blowing. You just have a go at blowing, and then you have a go at gathering or parison making. I went on the parison.
The amount of skill that went into it was unbelievable because the gatherer, before he started his shift, in his own time, he had to get his rod, steel rod, tapered steel rod, and make a a clay ball at the end that was called a moil, and he used to have to make that himself before he started and bake it in the opening to the furnace, to the pot, and that was determined the size of glass that he was going to have to pick up, because he repetitively put the moil on the surface of the glass and just picked up the right amount of glass and transferred it over to a parison, which was gravity fed. Then the parison maker, with a pair of shears, cut that glass, called a gob, which had to be the right size every time, because if it wasn't the right size, the mould was made for that size. Else you'd end up with faults. You'd end up with thick walls or thick base, and if it was too little, you'd end up with thin walls, or it didn't form the glass. So it was, even though it was a manual, semi-skilled job, there was a lot of skill in those particular two men, the gatherer and the parison maker. The blower just added the extra air to it to push the glass out to fill the mould. But it all had to be done repetitively while the blower was finishing that last bit. The gatherer was getting another piece of glass to put in the parison, and everything had to work. And then the taker in, he was the checker as well, so he had to check every piece of glass to make sure that it was okay to carry on onto the leer to be annealed. It wasn't a job that just anybody could do. Gathering and parison maker, they didn't get them sort of jobs straight away. You had to start taking in, before they'd even consider moving you up to one of them jobs, because they were the two chaps that made that chair make money, and in turn made the factory make money. It was piecework, you see. So if you wanted to earn money and you were on a good chair, which was a group of men that did the production, from the gatherer, the parison maker, the blower, and the taker in. And if you got a good gang or chair, you could earn good money.
In those days, it was quite a good place to work on piecework. It was one of the best paid round here. The harder you worked, the more you got. It was arduous work, and it was hot, of course. It was incredible, really. Because, when you're standing in front of a hole in the furnace, and in there it's 1300 degrees centigrade, it's hot. We got fans blowing all around the place, but all they did was blowing hot air all around. But it was a very good crowd.
I enjoyed working for Trent Valley, and we were all a nice, lovely crowd of people.
I started working for the buyer, time with him into estimating, did quality control, into the drawing office, went through all aspects of it, and I sort of got more and more noticed until I went into the sales department. Then I became sales manager, sales director, and eventually managing director. It was probably, with Nestles, it was the biggest employer in the area. Virtually everybody in Hatton either worked for Nestle or for Clayton.
The working conditions generally were good, but they were noisy, so that was something that had to be addressed to prevent people becoming deaf. So the ear defenders were then introduced. But occupational health, or first aid as people used to look on it as, involved all the aspects of keeping people healthy within a working environment.
In the 1980s, we had to modernise the abattoir. You had to have a day at least of water supply in storage. Previously, a slaughterman had to have a scabbard with maybe 4 or 5 knives in, and he'd use one for one job, and then he'd change and use another for the next job. Whereas the regulations, as they tightened, required that each knife should be sterilised between each operation. There was a point at which the regulations outlawed wooden butcher's blocks, so that had to be removed, and a plastic one was on order, and the wooden block was under the barn across the yard where the hay and straw were kept for bedding animals. And the meat inspector one day, he bought some meat for himself, and he was in the barn cutting it up on the wooden block because the plastic block hadn't arrived yet. And in fact, since then, I believe wooden blocks are now no longer outlawed because they've found out that bacteria can't survive on wooden blocks where it can on plastic. The wooden block is more hygienic.
My ambition during school, up to leaving, was to be a fine artist. And I got places at 2 art colleges, but I didn't go because my dad was out of work and you didn't get financial help them days like you do. And I ended up at the Trent Valley Glassworks, and I went thinking, because you're 16, quite naive, oh, they're going to put me in the office. And I went to work in the acid etching shop.
Well, we were getting towards the end of the mainline locomotives. We built them for British Rail, 2 or 3 contracts, New Zealand Government Railways, Western Australian Railways, Saba Railways, Jamaica Railways, we exported them to South Africa. We built the most powerful diesel electric locomotives ever to leave these shores. The company made a decision, and this was where I really came in 59, 60, 61. Well, we needed to use our expertise, but we needed to branch out. And what we did, we went into mining locomotives and tunnelling locomotives. So I remember the first contract number, 4530, was for Merrill Island in Canada. So we built small locomotives from 2 tons up to 25 tons, operated on rails underground in either coal mines or metalliferous mines, for hauling the ore trains from the face to the bottom of the pit shaft, where they were hauled up to the top of the pit shaft. Now, we built those and we supplied them to about 80 countries around the world. And I went to 65 of those countries selling them. And we became the #1 supplier in the world of mining locomotives.
People talk about the glassworks, talk about, and all about the good times. It wasn't a good place to work for comfort or anything like that. It was basic. I mean, the women worked there. I mean, they worked really hard, but it was hard work. And but it was a good crowd.
Look back on the how good the blokes were, really.
I'd never been in a factory before. I'd never seen anything like it before. So to go in, the smell, the sweat of the people that were working in there, even though it was early in the morning, and boy, was I nervous.
I was treated with suspicion, rather, initially, because I thought, what is she going to do? You know, this sort of thing. They hadn't been used to this sort of thing. People used to have the big bouffant hairstyles with all the hair out and wear sandals for work and that sort of thing. However, as time went on, like everything else, they accepted me and I became part of the factory community.
It was acid shot work, so you had a board, and I don't know even if they still do Charlie perfume, but that used to be the biggest one we did. You'd have 54 bottles in bungs on the board, and you had to lift them, dip them into a bath of acid, then dip them into a rinsing bath, and then you put them in a bath where you rinse them off, and hopefully they'd all come out this nice white acid colour, but you hadn't had aprons, arm shields, goggles. If you've got acid in your eye, the 4-person on the job, they literally take you, put your eye under the hot, cold water tap. Oh, you're all right, get back to work.
Well, I suppose the pay was right for the time we were working, you know, the money. I can't remember what the wage was now.
My first wage packet, I think it was £4.50, and I went home, and bearing in mind, I think I was coming up for, when I was 16, coming up for 17, and give it my mum. And then my mum gave me £2 out of it.
Yeah, they had a shutdown. Yeah, they had the 2-week shutdown. I always remember, fortunately, it was always around my birthday at the end of July. So we always used to go to Blackpool. Yeah, the factory just shut down. They had to keep the furnaces going and the boilers going because they couldn't let them cool down. But otherwise, yeah, they had the glassworks shut down.
There was a social club, and this was on site, and the manager at that time had a wooden building erected for meetings for the social club, and there were sports teams, ladies football teams, men's football teams, and they used to play other factories.
We had a Christmas party at Christmas. Then we had a party, yeah. That's Clayton's. I thought we had an outing. I'm sure we did.
So, I mean, you were gonna-
Yes, that's the Trent Valley.
Yeah.
Trent Valley outing, that one, that's the one.
You used to get a thimble of sherry if it was somebody's birthday. And then you'd climb on top of the stack of boxes and you'd have to do a bit of a dance, because that was our entertainment. And on a Friday, the furnaces on the other side, where they used to do the sandblasting and everything, we used to take a potato wrapped in foil, and the lads would bring it down for us. So on a Friday dinner, we had a jacket potato together, which health and safety standards, because you'd not washed your hands, you just sat there on what you were working on and sat on a jacket potato.
On the night shift, there was one chap from Utoxeter on the Lears doing the sorting and that, and he could sing, and there was quite a lot, and they were singing at night. And there's a lady in the house that's opposite her, and I know all my life. When I was going to work one morning, she said to me, she said, "Can I have a word, Harry?" I said, "Yeah." Said, "The singing is lovely." Said, "It's really nice. It sounds, but 2 o'clock in the morning, it's a little bit too much." She said.
Well, I considered it as a good job because I was going home and putting a wage packet on the family's table. So that meant, as a large family, you knew that bread and butter would be put there at some point for you to eat as well. You know, and it's the feeling of achievement, I think, in them days was greater, the fact that you were helping your family. Whereas these days it's to buy the car, buy the house and everything. Back then, we were so grateful to help our families.
I worked 35 years there, from 1960 in February to June 1995. So that was 35 years service.
To me, it was like one big family. And the nice thing about it is that whenever you meet people, you talk about Trent Valley Glassworks. You know, people who work there, you talk about it, you know, about the old times, as they say. It's incredible. It still goes on, that does.
Well, unfortunately, through lack of orders and mass production, the factory came to a halt and finally shut in July 1983.
There was a lot of imports coming in. That's what really killed it. And of course we were semi-automatic, but automatic machines as well can make a hell of a lot more. They can make as many in a shift as we can make in a week.
It was a terrible shame for the village because you just took it for granted that Trent Valley was there. That was the village employment, and for it to shut, and it sat there idle for a long, long time, and they didn't do anything with it. It was just a shell of a building that was slowly deteriorating, and then they just flattened it all, and then now they've built bungalows on it.
My husband always said, when we came, he says, "I'm sure the factory will fall down when you leave." And he took me out for dinner that night, and we came back via the factory, and his comment was, "Oh, the factory is still standing," which I thought was quite funny, really. But I did enjoy my time there, enjoyed working with people and seeing that their health was not affected by their working conditions.
I gave up slaughtering because I'd built a new abattoir. The business had expanded enormously. I was working 24/7 and no longer wanted it. It wasn't enjoying it anymore, and subsequently let my abattoir, and it is now actually a halal sheep abattoir.
I like it because you're able to mix. In the early days, nobody had very much and everybody was helpful. And there's still a certain amount of that now, but we all should retain memories and keep the friendship and love in the village going.
Yes, I just love it. Everybody's friendly, everybody talks to you. There's everything here, shops, buses, everything.
Everybody in Hatton knows about this one, the log vase. This is a smaller version, there's a bigger one of it, and there's quite a few in the village. And yeah, we used to make 1,000 of those.
I love it here. Hatton is the reason I've not moved away. Hatton is the reason I've got involved with so many community groups to try and keep that community going. The youth group, absolutely love that with a passion. And I just love being in Hatton. I'm proud to be a Hattarian, or whatever we're called.
This one was made for bicentenary at Bowmore's Whisky on the Isla. They sent the original bottle, which they'd found on a tip, and asked if we could replicate it, which we did. I was quite proud of that one because it's a very difficult one to make, that.
Everybody who leaves Hatton, they always come back, so it's got to have something. It's got to have something that brings everybody back. I think it's just a friendly place. Everybody knows everybody, and that's it.
A lot of people will say, yeah, I remember that, and then they get going on what happened, you know. You forget things, and get as old as me, you forget a lot of things. But you set people's thoughts going again, and they remember.